this particular podcast, it's because there are a lot of talk in the market when it comes to real estate marketing. There are different opinions. People say it lack innovation, or people say now everything seems quite similar in terms of the campaigns or anything which goes around when it comes to real estate marketing. So I believe, why not talk to the experts directly from this particular field? And that's why you both, being a marketing experts, are here today. So let's get into the, I think, bottom of it, to know what really real estate marketing is all about. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before I start into the nitty-gritty of marketing, I want to know from both of you. I'm quite curious to know that why you got into marketing, especially when it comes to real estate, because the kind of experience you both have, I'm sure the time you joined real estate, it was not that organized how it is today. And during those times, we have heard a lot of stories, a lot of challenges, especially coming how to deal with the builders during that time and convince them why marketing is important. So let's go with each individual of your story and journey, why you started marketing in real estate. So starting with you, Dhruba.
I would start with saying, it was my obvious choice to move into the marketing in real estate because I've been into the marketing ever since I started my career. And my focus was pretty much in marketing because, that's something which I grew as a passion right from every other industry that I worked with from a marketing perspective. I was in a banking industry, I was in NBFC, I worked in BFSI from an insurance perspective. So the entire movement of mine was always to look at consumer in different space altogether. And real estate per se is something which was obviously very attractive. One, from the perspective of the spends that this industry used to do, and that was a big pull. And obviously the variety of consumers that you put together in such kind of an industry, which is a person who is ready to buy a product which is of so high involvement, is a fascinating thing. Plus, it's not just about an individual, but it's an entire family, extended family. So it just is the most exciting part of being a marketer, to understand that from a consumer perspective. So I got an opportunity in Purvankara and I just hopped into that.
But you made it sound all positive. Were there not any challenges you faced during those times, in especially where you had to deal with making people understand why those marketing budgets are very important?
Yeah, so challenges would be there in any of these industries that you work for from a marketing perspective. Challenges were big, and because of the challenges, it was even more interesting to be in an industry like that, where everything is looked at from a gray, spectacle. Is when we joined into this industry, and from there on to now, I wouldn't say that it's really moved into black and white, but we are still we are closer to that, and a whole lot of understanding, a whole lot of new marketing strategies which have started working in, and people have started recognizing. The organizations have started recognizing in terms of how one should do various practices to get the right kind of consumer, and hence that's the growth forward. So yeah, challenges were there in banking as well. Challenges were there in any other industry. So the challenge was even more exciting to be part of. So that's how I take that.
So tell us about your journey, CJ.
Well, mine started at home actually. At least the marketing bit of it. So my dad's a sales and marketing guy from a different industry. He had the opportunity of being in different countries across the world, for that matter, also. So a lot of my exposure started with my dad at home, where I would glance through some of the stuff that when he went for seminars and workshops, when he was upskilling himself, he would bring some of that stuff home, and I would just glance through it. I was too young to understand a lot of it, obviously, but the academic interest for marketing started there. As far as real estate happened, real estate was a little bit of an accident. If I go back 19 years, I had just moved back to India and I was looking for an opportunity. I was looking at multiple sectors to try and get a grassroots opportunity, so that I wanted to learn the city, I wanted to learn the culture, I wanted to learn about the people. And, my first real estate employer happened. And my blessing so far in the 19 years that I've been here is that the challenges that usually occur across real estate from a marketing or branding standpoint, I've not faced a lot of those because I've been blessed with great leaders who already had their mind and heart set on advertising, marketing, and branding themselves. My challenges for myself has been to learn quickly, to adapt quickly through the changes, to try and keep reflecting, communication and tonality that reflected what our customers wanted, and that it's the most interesting challenge that I will remain. For us as marketers, as to it's what's the right thing to say, what's the right thing to show, how honest can you be, how authentic do you want to be in terms of communicating your brand and your product and advantages of that product. Because just like Dhruba said, it's a high involvement industry. I think 93 to 95% of the transactions that actually happen are once in a lifetime transactions. I don't think there's any other industry that has that kind of hit rate where people are buying your product just once in their lifetime for the majority of it, and you have to create such an impression on them that they choose to invest money that they don't have yet in your product. It's just lovely. I think every day. And with consumer behavior changing so rapidly now, right? With all these influences of social media and television and the movie culture, for that matter, all of those changes, you can see them when you go out into exhibitions and your site offices and you overhear conversations or you sit down and observe some of these conversations. The questions they ask, I mean, the consumers are so well informed these days, right? With the amount of homework they do before they come, and all of that put together, it's the thrill of it comes from the fact that you said the right thing and that person is here. That's where it starts from, right? Just because you said something right and you showed something right, very simply, and just because of that person has come to your office. Now the rest of the journey is how you treat that person, etc., etc. So yeah, I mean, not the typical theoretical challenges that maybe a lot of our counterparts would have faced, but challenges in a more enjoyable way.
But would you say, and would you also agree that 19 years ago, marketing that time in real estate industry was relevant? When I say relevant, was it the frontier, like where when it comes to communication? Because during those times, what we have seen is mostly the newspaper ads were there, right? And much more like how it's happening, be hoarding or be digital or the usage of technology, performance marketing, and everything. But during that time, the focus of the builder was कि sales आनी चाहिए, broker को बुलाओ, अपने के पास जितनी ज़्यादा booking आ सके. But marketing was not a key focus area, I would say. Would you agree on that?
Yes, I will. And we were just talking about at lunch today. The industry has evolved. I mean, we all know what's happening today, right? And how marketing has come from the back seat to probably the front seat, or is making that move, right? But yes, what we call conventional advertising today was the mainstay back then, right? It was television, not so much television. I mean, it depends on which market you came from, obviously. But it was print, it was outdoor, it was a little bit of SMS because it was still in its nascent stage and as a marketing or advertising tool. Paper inserts, that was also very popular back those days. So it was very conventional. But I think I think we limited ourselves with how much we wanted to imagine back then. Technology was also a limiting factor then, right? There was not so many options like we have today to exploit or use back then. But yes, old school advertising, let's just call it advertising because that's what it was. It was not really marketing. It was not, PR was not, nobody was saying PR back then, right? Nobody was saying brand. I think the first time I heard brand as a word in theoretical discussions with leaders or with teammates was after the first 5 or 6 years, right? And then we opened our doors, our ears and eyes and started, grasping from everywhere. We were trying to learn what was Coke doing, what was Apple doing, what was, IBM doing, what were B2B brands doing, what were B2C. And then, the learning is all kind of brought us to where we are today. It did have its limitations, advertising, right? You can only reach so many people. Yeah. But with that, we were also building a different type of frequency. So certain publications that gave us, a very dedicated space for realtors and real estate companies to talk about, those publications we started advertising every week, right? To build that frequency, because marketing is also about frequency, right? So we would take, today maybe you take 10 outdoor locations. For whatever reason, you're just taking 10 outdoor locations as part of your campaign. Those days, we were taking 60, 70, 80.
Hundreds,
Hundreds of sites altogether. So it was a different set of theories, a different set of practices back then, which was, like I said, limited by our own imagination and limited by the tech of those times. Did it pose challenges? I don't think anybody realized it back then, right? Because everybody was just busy trying to make a difference in the customer journey, in the communication you were posting to bring your customer to you, and also in terms of talking about the benefits of your product. Right. I think that if you want to talk about innovation, the only bit of innovation that happened back then was how interestingly did you put your amenities within your layouts or even your single building projects. How interesting did you make it for them to introduce them to the word lifestyle? Right. That was the game back then, or that was the communication peg back then, actually. And since then we've evolved, and again, we are where we are today.
Yeah.
So, Dhruba, you tell me that, as CJ also mentioned, there were limited resources, right? Technology was not much there. SMS was one part of it, which just could, I think, send bulk SMS about where the project is coming and everything. During those time, I understand even budget must be constrained, right? So there be certain particular just given for marketing. But now the days are where the marketing budget are quite big when it comes to real estate brands. Earlier in those days, they were very restricted about certain, budget to be given in marketing. So how did you manage those challenges?
So I think I'll just take a bit of what CJ mentioned. So it wasn't really when I joined the real estate industry as well. I think we never faced a budget constraint per se. But again, the worst of when we were then was from the perspective that, like CJ mentioned, it was advertising and not marketing really. Yeah. So the entire jawabdari of, are you getting that ROI was not really existent at that point in time. The marketing or the advertising at that point in time was, can I do a whole lot of carpet bombing or on the place? Kisi kahin to lag jayega. It'll fit in any of the places and I'll hit the consumer which is there. And at a lot of times you'll find one out trying to outdo another brand within the same micro market. And real estate per se, if you look at, is a very localized kind of a business in terms of an industry, how even the consumers perceive. Yeah. So everybody was trying to outbeat others through this advertising. And I remember there was a time when even Credai had come up together with all the other developers and saying, hey, let's not take anything more than a half page. That should be the biggest format that we should take because it's only harming each other. And it's the print media which is actually taking away the entire money that we're earning. But it probably lived for less than a month. And then everybody really started advertising because everybody had to capture that share of voice, per se. And when we started off with those, it was like, how much more can I put together? So my budget at that point in time was also, I would say, quite similar to what I have today. But just that today, every penny that we're spending, we're going back and really looking back, digging at, are we putting it in the right place? Have we done enough to put that money to the best use? And that's where, and how you use it from an overall marketing perspective. So I remember there are campaigns, and that's why I mentioned there are hundreds of hoardings that we have taken. Now today, if I have to do a hoarding, I would actually map out my entire consumer who is going to buy into this location, where all either their offices are or their residences are. And then I will take those micro markets and put my hoardings because I don't want to overspread my spends or getting a spillover which may not give us or which may trickle in one or two sale, but my majority is still. So I'm constantly optimizing my budget today. So it wasn't then that, and from the challenges perspective, yes, since we had the budget, you would find a whole lot of other colleagues who would come in saying that, why are you spending this money? You give it to us and we will throw up we'll call the customers at the site and they will buy it. I mean, in fraction of a cost of your print ad, I can actually get sale done. So that it was more of fighting those mentalities and to crack down from there and making them understanding, taking them along, saying that why it is very important that one, we communicate, we promise certain thing, and you come into the picture to ensure that whatever we are promising is delivered. That entire cycle, if it doesn't fit in, then none of these things about screaming out loud or even going specific targeted marketing, everything falls apart. So that was a bigger challenge, to bring everybody together, make them understand what consumer stands for, because everything you can't solve with marketing. You have to take the entire, all the functions along. So those were the challenges which over a period of time evolved. The other way to look at from a marketing perspective, we learned over a period of time how the consumers behave and how can we keep optimizing our resources every now and then. So that's I think the journey that we've had.
But it sounds quite interesting because it seems like how earlier, film directors used to do that. हर जगह होर्डिंग्स लगा दो, जितनी ज्यादा विजिबिलिटी होगी उतने लोग आएंगे. That's how I assume the real estate guys were doing. But then how were the launches? Was it similar to how the movie premieres were happening? How were the launches of the projects happening during those times?
Yeah, so launches per se was an announcement of the launch, and people would come in saying that, oh, there's a new project which has launched and I want to, buy it. But if you look at how the industry moved and adopted a whole lot of practices by any other industry, for example, today we all talk about EOIs and stuff like that. It's a practice which was taken up from the financial industry per se. It was completely an IPO lift, basically how IPO used to bring in the expression of interest for any kind of shares that you would like to buy. That was converted into identifying two things. One was to identify, is there a demand for that product and at what cost. So it was pretty much a price discovery that started happening with these kind of methods. Plus a whole lot of other things came into play in terms of what we today very, how they, in fact, the younger generations started using the FOMO. It's actually creating that FOMO in that kind of a scenario and pull in a whole lot of sale from the customers who are interested in. But very interestingly, if you look at this entire launch per se, in fact, we moved from launch to pre-launch. So pre-launch earlier days used to be only for a limited number of people who were probably investors or brokers or agents who would actually bring in monies to the developers.
True.
And then that would give them a window much prior to when a developer is ready to even dig a hole in the ground, and with the promise that whatever you invest in, I will double or triple the money because I'm going to launch it with your share and take it to the market. But when more developed, more people like Purvankara and all, we moved in, a lot more professional developers came into play. That is when we saw that there was an opportunity which was sitting in this short term of pre-launch. Because we saw that there were consumers who were actually buying properties with us who are end users.
Right.
So why not give that entire benefit of a pre-launch kind of a thing and take it to the actual consumers and bring them that same benefit? Because at the end of the day, either I take it from an investor or I crowdfund it almost when they are actually buying it ready to buy.
Yeah.
And that's when the entire gambit or the economics of how the launches changed altogether. And that's what we see today.
So were the pre-launches that time a grand opening show?
No, it was actually the launch. Your go-to market was the highlight, right? So taking a leaf of what Dhruba said is your pre-launch, your off-the-plan sales, another popular term that's been used, was always within the network. It was I think a lot easier to understand back then, at least at the promoter level, because these promoters who lead large organizations today one day sat in a sales office and met every single customer that bought, right? And with that, they built that insight to understand the difference between an investor and the end user. So it kind of exists even till date, right? That every promoter or set of partners that lead a firm has their own network of people, right? We could be the first booking from a spiritual reason, also starting with something as simple as that, and as sentimental as that, to people who say that wherever you go, I want to put some money, right? I may not be able to buy 3-4 apartments, or I may not be able to buy 10,000 square feet of retail or commercial space, but I want to be a part of your growth story. So every time you launch, you call me first. I will take something with you, right? So people who believed in the brand. And then there's a third bit that was, I know XYZ brand helps me grow, but whether it was by leaps or bounds or whether it was step by step. So I'll always put something whenever they launch a project, irrespective of the classification of the product. So this network of people were the first people told about a project that was coming up, and they were the ones to, in most cases, receive a price benefit, obviously, But I think, in my experience with the brands that I've been, and as an observer of the market, I think the launch, your go-to market, that big double jacket on the broadsheet, the most popular broadsheet of your market, was the highlight event, right? That's when the larger number of people got to go, because if a product was getting launched like that in a non-competing suburb, means I'm not operating in that suburb, I would only get to know when they went public with it. Right? If they were doing something within their network, within the channel partner fraternity of that micro market or adjacent markets, it's not going to spread. If something was happening in central Bombay, very few people in the western suburbs would get to know about it. So, like I said, it was the 100 hoardings, it was the multiple jacket ads on multiple broadsheets, because if you go back a couple of decades, there were multiple broadsheets, right? All of them had their healthy segments of the market, and they were competing against each other. So they were throwing deals at us also. You take 3 jackets with us and we'll give you this, or you take 2 jackets with us and we'll give you this. And every media operator, then the television guys also stepped in, the radio guys also started stepping in, outdoor days. Everybody understood from each other. Now everybody's throwing deals to try and get more and more business, whether it is from that project or that tactile campaign for 2-3 months where you're putting a lot of media spends, or whether it was for the year, right? So I think, I'll have to say that a lot of the times it's the launch, the go-to market officially, especially in the pre-RERA days, right? That was very, very evidently the big milestone for that product. Because no matter, even if you don't say it in your communication as a marketer or as a promoter, that is the cheapest price point of that product ever. Right, so you make the biggest noise then. So that's my observation of the industry.